Hi, so let's talk now about the global pandemic and basically what's been right and wrong about the response globally to it. Now, I think the first thing to remember is that we're not in an epidemic or a pandemic, we are in a global pandemic because basically much of the globe is afflicted by the coronavirus. And that makes a difference when you consider the response to it. So early on, basically, what we saw was a whole lot of lockdowns towards the end of March, going into April. And then more recently, of course, we've seen Victoria go back into a second lockdown to deal with their outbreak that came from their hotel quarantine program. So what are lockdowns and why do they help? Basically, lockdowns have allowed the healthcare system to catch up with a disease they weren't expecting. So when they planned for 2020, last year and the year before, they weren't expecting to be dealing with this. They weren't expecting to be dealing with an infectious disease problem of this magnitude. Probably they were just expecting the seasonal flu, the influenza. So the net result of all of that is that coronavirus has only been dealt with in terms of preparing the health system, allowing it to catch up, and that's been the response, and that's been very right to do that. The problem has been that causes huge economic problems, and when we talk about economic problems, we're talking in the trillions, and not single-digit trillions, but double-digit trillions globally. And we may not even be halfway through the expenditure. In fact, we're probably not. There's a lot more to spend. The British have spent, or planning on spending, about £300 billion. In Australia, we're planning on spending about 300 billion in total. And that price tag is going up. And if it's the case that a vaccine comes part the way through 2021, then we won't get back to normality potentially till 2022, even halfway through it. And that has very real issues for not so much global trade, although that's a part of it, but certainly trade that relies on global movements, and that's the airline industry. And a whole range of other international transactions, and very simple things in terms of people paying their rent, paying bills, and the economy working based on those transactions. So the net result is government has to step in and spend hundreds of billions, and even though Australia has been quite generous, I think they will have to spend more, the government. And I think also that means the rest of the world needs to spend a lot more. So it's going to cost a lot more money. And how we pay that back, or to what extent we pay it back, is another issue. But also, we run into issues of how we deal with outbreaks in the future. Do we have more lockdowns? Now, that's certainly how some places have decided to manage it. Europe's currently sort of going back into lockdown for November 2020. The French, the Italians, the Spanish, the Germans, and of course the UK having difficulty. But is there something missing? Is there something we need to do to repair the situation? And I think there is. I think lockdowns are very good for managing the health system, but they cost a lot of money, hundreds and hundreds of billions that you have to spend, and where necessary, print money as well. But I think also we're now beset with the problem that once you release the lockdown, you need social distancing, you need hand cleanliness as well, you need a whole range of things to make sure that the virus is not transmitted. Now, we've seen pictures, sadly, in some nations of police going around, even shouting at people, filming on their phone, telling them that they're killing people by being outside using their phone. That's not very helpful. And it's important to look at other ways of dealing with this. And I'm absolutely certain that we now need COVID marshals, probably one for every 10 or 20,000 for the next year or two, basically reminding people in public to keep social distance, handing out hand sanitizer, because it's very easy for people to go back to their normal behavior of close association with other human beings once you're out of lockdown, and there's a great deal of relief when you come out of lockdown. And I think it would obviously be too much for just the flu on its own, but now that we're facing COVID-19 as a form of influenza as well, like along with the seasonal flu, we actually need to deal with this issue far more seriously. That means marshals to remind people, and not to arrest people or to berate them, but certainly to encourage them to stay social distance and to maintain hand hygiene. And I think, obviously at a structural level, we need more money into infectious diseases. That means more infectious disease wards and beds for the hospital system. And I think public amenities like public bathrooms, they've been defunded over many decades. And I don't think that's helpful at all. I think we probably need to renew our expenditure in that area and go on a much larger and decade-long program of encouraging public hygiene. And that will require expenditure, because one of the marks of a civilization is having running water that stops bacteria from forming biofilms because you're able to wash your hands, so on and so forth. Public hygiene allows civilization to work, allows urban civilizations to work. Disease has toppled many a civilization and empire in the past. Certainly that's the way the Hittites, one of the reasons the Hittites came undone was because they were successful in war, but they took over a population that was ravaged by illness, and then they all got ill. So I think basically lockdowns have their place, but they are enormously expensive and they're a very small part of the solution. Ultimately, we need marshals to encourage social distancing in public places, and we need a lot more money put into infectious disease treatment and management, including hospital wards and beds, and also public amenities, public bathrooms, so that people have the facilities to maintain good hygiene when they're out and about.